Welcome to the August 11th, 2026 special session, which is our 45th voting session, work session, and executive session of the Mayor and City Council of Hagerstown. The meeting is now called to order. I'd like to ask for a motion to move into special session.
So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're in special session. And first up is resolution approval of city FY 2027 Community Development Block Grant Subrecipient Agreements.
Mr. Mayor, hereby move for adoption of a resolution authorizing the execution of 13 subrecipient agreements for the following nonprofits, organizations attached to this resolution. Adoption of the resolution includes $126,000 in public service grant funding, $40,000 in housing-based services, and $25,000 in capital project grant funding. The time of performance for all sub-recipients is through June 30th, 2027, or the date that all approved funds have been reimbursed, whichever occurs sooner.
Have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Approval of year 3 contract with Granicus for the meeting management system.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for the mayor and council approval of the third year, the contract with, can't even pronounce it, Granicus for the meeting management system and related cost. The total amount for the third and final year of the contract includes subscription fees of $27,000, $81.96, a credit to compensate for delayed implementation of $20,403.06, and one-time fees for hardware and training of $17,900.40. The final total amount is $25,310.24.
We have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, that adjourns special session, and we'll move now into work session. And first up, we have the American Change Agent, a life and legacy of diversity, equality, and inclusion. Nada Leak and Dr. John Leak.
Good afternoon, Mayor McIntyre and council members, city administrator, city clerk, and everybody here, and everyone on Facebook. My name is Ananda Leak, and this is my co-author, Dr. John F. Leak, my dad, and together we wrote his memoir, American Change Agent. And so my dad's going to introduce the book, and then I'll share why we're here.
Yes. It was interesting. I wrote this book initially after having written a letter to my daughter, telling her a little bit about me, and gave it to her at her birthday. And then she said, why don't you have 3 sons? And so I wound up writing a book, a letter to all the children. And after that, I began to realize maybe I have something to say that other people might enjoy and might get something from. And that created this. And that's been the work of my life, particularly as a change agent. We have been so connected to Hagerstown because part of my ancestry starts with the fact that my great-grandfather, he left with his 14 children and wife from here in Hagerstown, going through the Underground Railroad. And recently we visited, and I actually had an opportunity to stand on the very grounds from which they would have left. I think it's significant because Hagerstown, as we understand it now, was the beginning of the Underground Railroad. People left from here escaping and going for freedom. And that's most significant, I think, in our whole American history.
So one of the reasons why we're here today is that in May, we had a book reading at Next Chapter Books. And we had such an amazing time there and met many members of the community that we thought, let's get the city of Hagerstown involved in some way. And we reached out and we were able to talk to Councilmember Burnett via Zoom, and she was the one who suggested that we come and we look and see if there are any opportunities coming up during Underground Railroad Month in September, or the Emancipation Day for Maryland in November, or sometime during this year, since it's the 250th anniversary of our country. One of the things that we try to do with the book is to promote the message that everyone's family, no matter when you came, how you came, that is history. All of us around this table, everybody in this room, everybody on Facebook, we have all contributed and continue to contribute to American history. So with that, we'd love to explore any opportunities that you all can think of today or later on. We'd also like to obtain a city proclamation honoring our family and their successful escape from Hagerstown via the Underground Railroad to Amherstburg, Canada, that marks their participation in the Underground Railroad during Underground Railroad Month in September. We also like to find out how we can go about obtaining a marker that lets people know that our family and other families more than likely used Jonathan Street and the AME Church, the Ebenezer AME Church, around the 1830s, 1840s to leave out of Hagerstown. Because from our research, we learned that Jonathan Street was the only street out of town leading to Pennsylvania. We have an obituary, which is included in your packet in our one-pager, that indicates that Leonard Leake escaped with his 13 siblings and his 2 parents, and we have documentation that they made it to Amherstburg. We've worked with the Amherstburg Freedom Museum and educating them during Black History Month this year. And so that's it. We're open for questions, comments, any next steps.
Thank you for following through with coming to join us. I did share initially your email to the body with the request of at least the proclamation, and I'm still in favor of proclamation. And any opportunities to connect. We have a community engagement team. Brittany, I believe you met, right? Brittany or Leah?
No, I haven't met Brittany.
Okay. Anyway, we have Brittany. Brittany
Okay.
is a key part of our events here in Hagerstown. So we'd like for you guys to meet up.
So we can
I'll
reach
send-
out.
Yeah, I'll send you a
That's-
contact after
That's
this.
email,
Yeah.
a phone call.
We're in need of looking at refreshing those, the historical markers anyway. So this would be a good time
Oh,
to
wow.
That would
maybe
be
look
nice.
into doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Councilwoman Bell also has been looking into that too as well.
Okay.
I want to say thank you as well for coming and making the connection with Councilmember Burnett. I'm so sorry I missed your, I was going to come to that. I'm so sorry I missed it. Looked like it was a really good event. I'm definitely interested in learning more about what you have, about your book, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And I'm all for us having a proclamation and whatever the city can do to help you guys out. I'm all for it.
Okay.
Appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you.
We just need one photo. And Councilmember Burnett is going to take it because you got to show that you were here. If you don't, it didn't exist.
And we're also streaming too.
Yeah, I'm going to catch photos. In my day job, I'm a chief social media officer. You ready?
Yes.
And then we're going to do one with the book.
If you don't mind me asking, what, how did you do your research? Was it just your parents knew your history, or like how did you go about?
Ancestry.com.
Yeah, okay.
We have a cousin that, like a lot of folks, they spend time on Ancestry.com, and she's our family genealogist, and she spent an enormous amount of time on my mom's side, and then she moved to other people to the different sides, and she was the person who let us know that we had family in Maryland. But it wasn't until we started working on the book, really, I got involved in during the pandemic. My dad started like in 2014.
14.
Yeah. When I got involved, I started looking around. The lawyer in me and the detailed person in me loves research. And so I was on Ancestry.com in 2022. I mean, still the pandemic, and I had a little time on my hands. And I was clicking and clicking and clicking, and the clicking led me down a rabbit's hole. And there's a woman from Lansing, Michigan, that she just finds unique obituaries and posts them. So about 3 a.m, I landed on that. There was nobody up for me to call, because in the obituary, it's written like an article. My father's grandfather's name is mentioned, and it was from Gary, Indiana. And there was another name. And that's when I knew. I was like, oh my goodness, we have been this close, this long. This is the jackpot. This is what we're looking for. And so then I made a trip to Hagerstown in 2023, walked around, went to the beautiful African American Museum here, talked to some people. I used the resources that the state of Maryland has online, walked around, talked to people, and we were able to put this information together and make some estimates. Yeah.
I think people don't really know how much Black history is truly in Hagerstown.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Well, Washington County, let's let,
Yeah,
in
yes,
general.
yes.
I mean, and thanks to the internet, there's, in the census records, you can get quite a bit. Yeah,
And when
so,
we spoke, I mentioned about the welcome signage at Wheaton Park, which is now up, right?
okay.
And the designer or artist that put it together, one of the struggles she had was to put all the Black history in that community together. But it was so piecemeal that it took a little bit of time,
Yeah.
because it's not just one location where you can just, pull up my family or your family or Erica's family or Councilwoman Bell's family. She's also from here too, born and raised here too. But yeah, it's so all over the place that it takes a little bit of time to find information, so.
I know I forgot her name. She helps with the halfway museum, cemetery, the Friends of the Halfway. I think I forgot what it's called, but she helped me do a little research. And if you haven't connected with her, I'd be honored to give you her name, because she does a lot of research, really geared to African Americans in this area.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I'm a time stickler, so I don't want to overstay.
Appreciate you coming.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
we appreciate having the opportunity to come and share. That's what we do. And I just try so much to have people to get into the book, because not only do we talk about our ancestry, I talk about my life. And my life has been about trying to do things that will deal with diversity and equality and inclusion. And and that's something that we're now struggling to maintain some of that work that I know I did over the last 50 years. So, thanks again.
I just bought it, so I'll pass it around.
Right. Well, we actually have copies here, so if people wanted
Well,
something, but I know you
I got
got
the
to do.
last one.
Huh?
I got the last one.
Well, we can leave some here, and someone here can take responsibility for then getting us the,
Yeah, I can send you the Zelle and the PayPal. Yeah.
good, yeah.
How
we'll-
many should we need?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I already got mine.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks
you.
again.
Sir, thank you.
Here. Right. Mr. Jacob Wheaton, the picture of
It was only one
Jacob
person, right?
Wheaton.
Because he just got.
I already got mine online, so yeah.
And you want, and you,
I'm not even gonna ask.
Too old to be playing those kids games.
I think, so.
I said, I'm not even gonna
Carol.
ask. Yeah, thank you. We don't have to say
Sitting on the
me.
couch is so much fun.
Yeah. And when it looks up on, you're just standing in the right place. But I'll add it to my on the list.
This one's over because he gets a son.
He does, he gives you the actual sign. Okay.
You two are sharing, right? I said you two are sharing, right?
No.
What do you mean? I can't read it after you're done? Okay, that's what I mean by sharing.
Oh my God, what is it? It's just like not only the day, but the time. Remember, we're supposed to get one over here too, right?
Still looking for a bigger one. Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have Mr. Jim Bender, asking about additional fireworks event at Meredith Park, September 18th, 2026.
Good afternoon. Every year, the city council has to approve a list of approved fireworks dates at Meredith Park. And the reason for that is they need to provide an exemption from the city's noise ordinance. So we did that, the list for 2026 earlier this year. But as you probably know, the Flying Boxcars are having a great season. And they've had a good enough season that they've already qualified for the playoffs at the end of the season. And so they are scheduled to have a playoff series on the weekend of September 18th and 19th. And they have asked for permission to add a fireworks show on the evening of Friday, September 18th, with a rain date of September 19th. And so because that date wasn't previously approved by the council, we wanted to bring it back to you and give you a chance to authorize that additional fireworks show.
Yes.
Very good.
Okay, so we'll prepare a motion for the regular session to document that approval. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Next up, a review of the nuisance abatement and property maintenance code, weed code update, rental facilities update, and habitual offender proposal. That's a lot. Paul.
It is. Amanda really will join me up here.
So as the mayor had mentioned, there was several items that we are tasked with discussing, some of which are just providing updates, just to kind of let you know where certain ordinances exist or as far as the weed control and in the rental facilities itself. So I'll start with the nuisance abatement and property maintenance code as far as weeds. There were some emails that floated around with some concerns on how do we classify different things when it comes to overgrowth at properties. So wanted to provide you all with an update. The nuisance abatement ordinance, we started it in 2001, so it's been around a while. Property maintenance code for weeds in Hagerstown's been around since 1965, so that's been around a long time. First it was 12 inches, then it got lowered to 10 inches for, it's considered, your lawn's considered a weed when it crosses that height. So if it's over 10 inches now, that's considered a weed. And then with that, there's always the questions of how do we take certain things? And I provide some pictures at the end of the memo there when we have people choosing to have wildflower areas. And we have areas of decorative ivy that grow over that have the weeds that grow up through the decorative ivy. Or we've had native weeds more recently where there's been concerns from neighbors. And then we're tasked with going out and trying to talk to this property owner with those certain conditions. The one thing that the property maintenance code mentions is that it's cultivated gardens. And through our commentary, it tells us that if it's uncultivated, meaning that they're not, you're not digging around the plants, like, you have something that actually looks like a garden per se, then we consider them weeds as well. Then, of course, the state of Maryland has what noxious weeds are. I am not going to read those different weed types in there because I do not have the ability to read those little terms. But basically, we kind of know what they are. Yes. For your knowledge, that we issue somewhere in between, 1,750 to 3,000 weed notices throughout the year. There's either just regular weed notices or nuisance abatements. We only mow on average a little over 300 a year, so we're not mowing that many. And actually, some of those are repeat offenders that are some of our vacant buildings in town that just don't get regularly mowed. The days to comply vary between 10 days to 1 day. Just varies on what time it is during the growing season. If we've been to the property multiple times, it starts reducing the number of days that people have to comply. For the cost of it, generally before the city even touch a blade of grass, it's a $100 admin fee and a $30 tech fee before we even start to mow. So it's already $130 before the city even just shows up at the property. Then there's the cost of the abatement itself that gets added on. Now, I wanted to just make you all aware that, through the bill collection process, that if a bill's unpaid for 60 days, if it's under $250, we send it to collections. And if it's over $250, then we lien it against the property. This was a process changed about 2024 to try to see if we couldn't get some success with collections on there. I'd love to tell you that it's working, but unfortunately, it's just not. We still have 63,000 plus still in collections right now. We've collected a little under 4,000 through collections. So we're not having success. People are just ignoring the collections and not paying the city.
Does that mean we don't do liens, we do collections instead?
If it's under $250, we do collections.
So here's my curiosity about that, because the state law just changed as we were notified by the treasurer's office that if it's only water and sewer that is the lienable item for a property within the city, that it looks like they'll no longer count that as being able to take it to tax sale.
That's correct.
So it would seem to me like we should reverse course in order to, as you know, make sure we get that collection, but also in the event that a property falls within both categories, that we have something beyond the water and sewer arrearage as the, item to be put on the lien for that purpose.
And that's something we can work out with the finance department. If that's the way, I think it expanded a little bit more though than just water sewer liens. I thought it included abatements and license fees and other things, but we can look into that. Can't recall.
And you can't send for you
those
can't-
types of items.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't what?
You can't send for, there has to be a delinquent tax, actual property tax. You cannot send, like, if it's just a water lien, you cannot send a tax sale for just a water lien.
Yeah, see, I thought it was just for utility arrearage.
No, it's for any non-property tax arrearage.
But, just sum up nuisance abatement, it goes well. I mean, we respond to the citizens' concerns. I would love to tell you that we get to them when they're 10 inches, but honestly, we get most of the calls when they're 3 feet tall. And we're trying to respond to the properties and then, we give the owners basically a week to comply. They don't, contractor goes out and our contractor is Public Works for majority of the stuff and does, clean up properties very quickly. And Public Works charges are very cheap. They do not, are not an exorbitant amount of money, a lot less than when we used to have a contractor. So the city is not doing it on a large dime to the citizens. But it does get it answered pretty quick. and it is meeting a need for the community. Like I mentioned, some of the pictures that we have, you can see the decorative ivy, the wildflower areas. I know Councilmember
The
Flaherty.
terrace has one now growing in the terrace.
We generally, when it's a wildflower area, we generally only have it between the sidewalk and the curb that we're telling them to mow. We haven't really touched the lawn, because we understand that, but I think as a general in the community, I think, I can't speak for you all, but myself, I wouldn't think we want that in every front lawn in Hagerstown. So it's very challenging for us to navigate that particular item. And then native weeds that we have at properties, I know they bring some sort of biological benefit to areas, but when it's 3 foot tall, it's very challenging for us to figure out what is native versus what is just an overgrowth of an area. And I can do questions on this one for nuisance
What
abatement.
percentage of these abatements would be on vacant or vacant properties?
I don't have that number.
mean, could you
can
guess?
certainly look at it. I mean, it's well over half, but I don't know if
Okay.
it's 2 out of 3, but it's somewhere
Okay.
between that area.
I have a question. When we do have these like, for the example of the pictures, how compliant are the owners on addressing it right away? Like, I know you say you give them a week. Is compliance ever an issue with it? Or have you ever had to go a little further than the week or go the next, I know you said over the, depending on what it is, what's the reaction to it, I guess I'm asking?
So generally, most people know that they need to mow. It's on the out-of-town ones that are surprised that they received a notice. But once we have a conversation, they generally mow. Like I was saying, we can do up to 3,000 in a year. We only abate 300, so it's usually between 10 to 20%. We're only actually mowing as a municipality.
You know what the city's rules on chickens are again? Because I'm talking about the other day and barking really loudly, and apparently there's a chicken behind someone's backyard. But
Chickens are not allowed
I
in the
figured
city of
that, but
Hagerstown.
it was interesting walking my dog and seeing that. But yeah,
What's the protocol, or like, is there a fine with that? Like, if they have it?
For chickens?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a violation of the land management code, and it can be a $500 fine per day for that type of offense. Generally, if we have a complaint about a chicken, we usually have to find them. It can be challenging sometimes. We get those calls, but if it's only a non-rooster one, that does take even more time to even find. But generally, neighbors will give us a tip on where they're located, and we will talk to the owners or issue a notice. They get 30 days to comply.
$500 per day?
Can be. Correct. When they don't comply.
so, there's a lot of people on Facebook saying, well, eggs are so expensive. Let me put some in the backyard. But I figured in the city, that's not.
Correct. There was a sign a few years ago when Farm, Family, and Home first came in, and they said, City of Hagerstown allows up to 3 chickens, and that's what they had on their little chicken thing in the store. So we had to go out and tell them that's not true. So we come across those challenges at times with places. Any other questions on nuisance abatement?
So, just to be clear, when you read chapter 64-8 as it applies to weeds, and like, let's say a neighbor calls and says, hey, my neighbor hasn't mowed their grass, and the grass, appears to be over 10 inches high. Does that fall under this section here?
So it can be either or. It can be a weed violation or a nuisance violation if it's over 10 inches.
Just the grass?
Correct. I don't know. Like, so once it crosses the threshold of 10 inches, it's considered a weed at that point.
As defined by the code?
The code, yeah.
So, I just think that there is a bit of a change in perspective that has grown. among people the differentiation between what the state determines to be a noxious weed, i.e. harmful to humans, and, you know, somebody who, I don't know, prefers a wilder lawn. Like, to me, they're two different things. And I'm just wondering, like, how you pick and choose.
I was wondering that too, because it's, I mean, you see flowers that grow really large, and so I guess, Councilmember, you're asking, like, is it like, do you make your own judgment on, like, if you go out and see a lawn that's a little overgrown, but it's flowers, or define the name of what it is, you know what I mean?
Right.
I'm just trying to read in here where grass becomes weeds at 10 inches. I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out.
That's in the commentary that guides us in our codes. So it's not in the codified stuff that's adopted, it's in the commentary. All codes that the International Code Council creates, they create a commentary to go with them to help a code official interpret the code as it's written. So to answer your question, and Councilwoman Bell's question there, it's a challenge, you know, because we're trying to balance what a citizen would want in their own property and having to meet the request of the neighbor that called us about the property complaining that that's high next door. So you have to take everything in totality of thinking, where can I land at for this situation that's going to meet the needs of the community, but not destroy what a citizen was wanting on their property. And codifying things is very challenging on it to determine that. And I would say tasking for you all, you have to decide what you would want your community to look like. If everyone chose that they just wanted to have wildflower lawns or you know, overgrowth because they wanted longer grass in their yard, we would have to determine, is that how we want our community to look?
So I guess for me, like, I'm thinking about the change in perspective of people's approach toward things like dandelion and sticky weed, all those types of things that people are clearly seeing differently than they've seen them. Because that's a growing trend. And clearly, you know, if I like dandelion in my lawn because I view it one way, my neighbor, you know, absolutely abhors, you know, that particular weed. Just like I said, I'm curious how we take what I'm reading in the code and how we then apply it to something we can't define as such, because one person defines it as something beneficial that they consume, and another person defines it as something they absolutely do not want and do not believe belongs in, you know, a manicured lawn.
Like a subjective view.
Yeah, hence what I'm here. If we define those items, that makes it very clear for us. It makes it very, very challenging, because then you all as elected bodies will receive those calls if we go in and mow someone's lawn and they were like, oh, I wanted this because I'm going to use dandelions to consume. And it makes it very, very challenging for staff, and it's trying to balance meeting the community's needs and trying to allow a citizen to have certain things, what guardrails that we want to put on something as a jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it possible for it to remain strictly to weeds outside of what's in the definition? And I know you're gonna say it's based on what we decide, but off of your experience, I'm just asking, would that seem?
It is very challenging because we are not botanists. We cannot determine what
Okay.
every single plant is when we walk out to a property. I know they have the apps now. We were on one on Salem Avenue last week, and we were trying to do that, trying to identify every plant out there, and then it's overgrowth and you don't know which ones it's scanning, and you're getting a lot of unknowns. It's very, very challenging for us to do that. It's very time consuming.
What's the duration of notification to the property owner before abatement actually occurs?
Generally 7 days if it started with a nuisance abatement. It could be up to 2 weeks if we started with a weed notice.
Because I would just think that there would have to be some type of reasonable time frame in which that property owner could then respond, hey, you know, here is my, position on this particular matter. You know what I mean? And I realize that isn't gonna be a lot of cases, but clearly there are cases that occur. And so I want to make sure that there is an appropriate time frame between posting of the notice and showing up of the landscape equipment, where the person has the opportunity, and an appropriate opportunity to say, here's what these things are, here's why I have them on my property, and here's how I tend to them.
Look into it.
Well, that's what I'm asking, time frame.
Yeah. The time frame is, so some of the examples that are in the photos there, generally they start out with a weed notice, just informing them of it. That generally gave them a week to comply.
Okay.
If we didn't see any compliance at that time, then it would be a nuisance abatement notice because we're trying to get the areas mowed and maintained into a standard. And then that would give them another 7 days. And then that would be 2 weeks for them to notify us.
Have you ever come across that situation where they receive the notice and then they, come back to your office saying, these are not weeds and this is what how often do you receive that?
Every growing season.
Okay.
So what is typically, what is the degree of validity that you typically find within the argument that that individual is proceeding to make?
It's a challenge. It honestly, we have to look at it. Usually I'm visiting this property with the inspector, the owners, talking to us, telling us what they're doing with it. They want to track whatever types of items. And then it's balancing that neighbor that's very frustrated on it because, as some of those photos you can see that we get a lot of calls about that. And then it's, why should I mow mine if they're allowed to do this, or I'll just do this too. So it's a very difficult thing to balance. I wish there was a straightforward answer, but there's just not. It's a case by case and it varies from property to property.
Okay.
I can look into the things as talked about, seeing if there's what other jurisdictions do and,
Come back.
bring
Like,
it
how do they
back.
make that distinction, right?
Yep, I can certainly do that. Okay.
Yeah, I would be interested to know how many jurisdictions follow the Maryland Department of Agricultural's guidance list for noxious weeds as the delineating factor, you know what I mean? Rather than the sort of blanket, anything over 12 inches is bad, or anything over 10 inches is bad. You know what I mean?
I'll get that together and I'll find out.
You don't come out with a ruler, do you?
No.
White glove.
And I've done the same thing. Like, I've done the whole go out, use the app, identify which ones are the bad ones. Need to post notification, you have to remove, these specific items. Because to me, the objective is to protect human health. I realize that some people's objective is that everybody has, the same 3-inch high lawn, you know what I mean? Entirely down the way. And personally, if it were me, that's a personal preference. But the objective, I think, is to protect human health from those things that we deem noxious,
I will work on getting all the stuff together for you to make a, kind of give us a little bit more guidance. That's one of the reasons why we're bringing that, so that we can get guidance for the next growing season. I'd love to say it's there, but we're having a little burn off right now, and honestly, our staff enjoys it so that we'd have less to do. Okay, so the next thing is the rental facilities update here, and there's a PowerPoint for that one. It looks like Eric might have gotten that working. And just want to provide some basic things. There have been some questions coming up about it, and provide you all with a little bit of information about the program. One of the things that is unknown is, how many structures and how many units do we have in the city of Hagerstown that are licensed? With it, we have a little over 3,800 structures in the city of Hagerstown that encompasses 9,881 units in Hagerstown. So we're closing in on the 10,000 number of units here in town. And something to make you aware of that since 2006, there's been 1,881 units added in Hagerstown for people to rent. So we are there, it is being added to in the population. To update you, there are several exemptions to the rental facilities program. Owner plus one has been around since its conception. Also, the owned and operated by the Hagerstown Housing Authority. And then something that's a little bit more newer is that we had any single-family homes that are used as the primary residence under a land installment contract. That's a more recent change to state law. That's considered an owner-occupied property, so that's exempt from the program while they have a land installment contract. We have ones that are through fee exemption. They still register, but they're through fee exemption with us. Those are ones occupied by a family member. And family members are defined within the code, but generally speaking, it's, think of parent, grandparent, child, grandchild, that type of way, and it's step natural ones of those. We also have ones that renovated underneath the PEP standards. They're exempt for fees for 4 years, and the new construction is also exempt for 4 years as well. As far as the rental licensing fees, since it first started, we were at $39 per unit. In 2008, it changed to $50 per unit. And in 2015, it went to $75 per unit. Rooming houses, we don't have many. So we have, 6 structures with 88 units. So we don't have many in town. That's been the same fee for a long time, or since the beginning of it. It's $100 per structure and $10 per unit. There were some questions regarding as far as the funding and expenses for the program. There's some summaries with this, but the license fees, they do cover approximately 73% of the program itself. Then we do have some from late fees and reinspection fees, and then the general fund does contribute about 21% of the funding for the program for it to operate. Most of the expenses are going towards salaries, as most programs do. And then the other stuff is through our mailings and through the vehicles, insurances, our phones, office supplies. So those are where most of the expenses are. But anyone, they have to complete an application. They have to provide us with a fair amount of information on that application. We also included email address. That was a change in, I want to say, the 2015 update that we required an email address. We do make them identify a designated contact person, but there is no distance for that designated contact person. I know the mayor has mentioned stuff like that in the past, but there's no distance requirement with it. And then we also ask them with the signature to acknowledge they understand the obligations of the ordinance. Some things that people don't understand is if you have a rental facilities program in the state of Maryland, we are required to collect the lead paint certificate numbers. We can't issue a license without those numbers. And then obviously the payment of those fees as part to be licensed. There is no inspection component to get a license. It is the paperwork part of it. There is no inspection required to get a license. They are two independent things. As far as exterior inspections, I kind of included what we saw about 10 years ago and then what we're seeing currently. Weeds and sanitation, of course, we were just talking about weeds and sanitation is just junk and debris on a property. We see them, very consistently out at properties. We have seen a decrease in chipping paint. A lot of times that's due to the lead paint requirements that are put out by the state. But we have seen an increase in window conditions and roofs and drainage. Honestly, just speaking on the exteriors, those are just on how things just deteriorate over time. Sometimes, you have a good roof and then 10 years later, you don't have a good roof. That's just kind of the way things happen. Rear premise identification, that has dropped out of the top 10. There's really, it's a minuscule number now. That was a recent code that was passed to help our first responders at that time. So, we required it on a lot of properties. They've complied, and then porches as well. Interior inspections, that we are seeing an increase in the number of electrical issues that we've come across. We're seeing an increase in the number of plumbing issues. Smoke and CO alarms are relatively maintaining the same, but that is kind of concerning. I don't know if the fire chief is still back there. Oh, yeah, he is. So that we still are seeing, no matter years later, still people not having the smoke and CO alarms installed. That they're the wrong type of CO and smoke alarm, or they're just in the wrong location to not properly alert a resident. So it's not changing. We keep on seeing the same violations. Interior surface conditions are decreasing. Mechanical equipment has increased on the number of times we cite that, and window conditions on the inside have decreased, but they're increasing on the outside. One thing that wanted to bring to your all's light there is that how our system kind of works for the interior inspections. This is where it's the more common question item with this program. The program itself requires a landlord to report any tenant turnover when the property is vacant, to request the city to come and do an inspection, but no more frequent than every 4 years. With the pie chart that I provided there, this was looking over the last 3 years of the city, that 41% of the turnovers that were to be reported to the city were reported correctly. Like, they had the tenant turnover, they called us, we conducted the inspection. The other 59% were ones that we had to make the people aware that they failed to report their tenant turnover to us. Of those, that 36% of the inspections that we had done were ones that we already had reached out to the owner, telling them, hey, you forgot to call us, we need to do an inspection. They scheduled an inspection with us. 23% of those ones ignored the request to do an inspection, so they just didn't get any inspections with us. On the side over there, I kind of provided what just last year was alone. We provide tenant turnover letters to people to remind them. We do it proactively and then reactively. Proactively, we send 861 letters out to people telling them, hey, you need to call us. You're coming up on your 4-year anniversary. Give us a call when you have your next tenant turnover. The 937 are letters that we sent that people had tenant turnovers and didn't call us, or didn't call us when they were supposed to. They did it. We had to inform them that they missed an inspection. So that is where we'll have one of the challenges with this program. At times we get comments being made about denying or revoking licenses. We've haven't denied an application since 2007. If people completed the paperwork and have everything correctly, we go ahead and accept them. Now, if they don't have the proper lead paint information, that may lead them to not having a license, but we do not deny any applications in the last 20 years. Revocation, since we created the point system, that we did, we haven't charged anyone since 2019 on this point system. Basically, it kind of gives some safety item violations, unreported tenant turnovers, municipal infractions, excessive use city services, property taxes unpaid for 180 days, and the rental license fee was liened. As we kind of talked about, the license fees being liened, we go to collections for those things, just in how the processes are done. And excessive city services is not something permitted by state law in its current edition, so we don't do that. So we're not getting the point totals through that system to actually even have anyone to qualify, so that probably needs looked at. But if a property was, if a license had it revoked, that they have to vacate after 60 days. As far as any fines that we've issued, as I'm throwing out percentages, the numbers are more staggering. Percentages are easier to look at, but it's just case management at that point. I mean, Emily has done a great job in following up with people and holding them accountable, but we have to choose our most egregious violators to actually issue fines to, because we just don't have enough man hours to fine people for failure to register and failure to report tenant turnovers. And a lot of those ones that fail to report are multiple ones at different properties or at the same property. The one thing that we changed back in, I use sometimes 2014 and 15 because we adopted in 2014, but it became effective in 15. So bear with me if I use different years. But that we allowed the ability to transfer a license. This before the licenses were not transferable. We changed that so that they could be transferred to a new owner. Kind of gives them a little bit of some fee savings if they do go through the proper process. If they get it to us in the first 30 days that they've taken ownership, there's no fee. 31 to 60 days, there's a $25 transfer license fee, and it's over 61 days, then there is a $75 per unit charge because that's the new license that they'd have to get. Our office proactively reaches out to people, asking them to transfer the license. We will monitor the water, electric, or the water changes for the accounts, and we'll send letters out to people and keep reminding them. It has been very successful, and it has saved people money doing that. The last thing I have here is just some of the other jurisdictions in the state of Maryland. There have been things in the past where people said Hagerstown was one of the few places to have rental licensing. Hagerstown's one of the many places in the state of Maryland to have rental licensing. Within the chart there, every county colored in yellow actually has a county-wide. And then the jurisdictions with the stars, they're the first ones with, or they are the ones with 7,500 or more citizens. They actually have a rental licensing program as well. The ones that are in collared up there are the ones that we visited. Our staff goes and visits other jurisdictions. We do ride-alongs with them, see how they perform inspections. We also meet with their staff and their front office to see how they process applications and what they do to kind of ensure our best practices are matching pretty much what else is in the state, and seeing what they may do that's, you know, better in Hagerstown that we might be able to incorporate. With these ones added to this, myself and Emily visited Coma Park on Friday to get information on that. I know Councilwoman Burnett, you have talked about several times about rent stabilization and different stuff. They have a very strong program with that tied to their rental licensing program. You know, I'll say that with the rental program itself, that, you know, we're very successful in identifying the properties that are rentals in the community and getting a curbside appeal. The percentages are showing how they're going down. They've decreased in time over the exteriors as far as meeting the minimum requirements for code here. Transferring licenses have been very successful, but I will say that complying with the interior inspection requirements has been the most challenging thing that our office faces. And honestly, it creates that adversarial role with us and property owners because we're telling them that they failed to report a tenant turnover, then they call us for an inspection, and then we're identifying code violations at the property. So it can be a lot of going back and forth for that. And also our license fees have remained consistent since 2015. But as you can tell, the program is not being funded like it once was back in 2015.
I got one question. Looking through the graph of the municipalities, I noticed, I mean, I think we brought this up before, but I've noticed radius for an owner's agent.
That's what,
What's that?
what'd you say? That's what I was looking at.
Radius for owner's agents. You know, Councilwoman Bell and I sit in on, just for instance, Bethel Gardens first neighborhood, and there's complaints about not being able to get a hold of a owner about a certain building. And I know, I was going to say out of state, but since we live in such close proximity to Pennsylvania and West Virginia, I was wondering if we could, anything else, if an owner lives outside of the radius of Hagerstown, whatever we determine, that they would have to have some sort of property management company that we can hold accountable or get a hold of.
That is something very common in jurisdictions, that they have some sort of local requirement. They have it from a distance. I think if you look at Frederick, they have it where it says the intersection of Patrick and something street, I think is how, Market and Patrick Street, they just say how many miles from that. I would advise against anything as far as Ocean City. They say that you have to live within 60 minutes or have to respond within 60 minutes. You know, depending on how quick someone drives, it can vary from distances. So I would think that distances would probably be more the tangible thing that we could measure if that was being provided.
I just know we've had difficulty getting hold of owners, and we can have property company that we can get a hold of. It'd be a lot easier.
I think that that's a bit of a double-edged sword, because I'm going to try as hard as I can not to use my most recent experience with a resident. But in that specific case, that was absolutely a local individual that could have responded in a timely manner that chose not to on more than one occasion. And when they did so, in my opinion, chose to respond in a manner that suited them. And I think they've chose to respond to this program in a manner that suits them. And we can't have that. Like, I can't sit here at this seat and say that, we're doing the good work of what this ordinance has always intended to be, and see an instance where in my opinion, every facet of that experience failed that individual, and to protect the right for that individual to have decent living conditions. So there could be somebody who lives in Florida that has a good local representative, you know what I mean, that properly takes care of those things. And so I think that there just has to be something in here that addresses response time, responsibility, regardless of where you live, regardless of of the distance from here, of which you run the property. So I think that's one issue that absolutely needs to be addressed, because we can't have an absence of response. And then, the other thing I noted, and that I noted yesterday in talking on the radio, and I'm glad you provided the chart, because it points to the fact that in my opinion, we were absolutely incorrect in sort of agreeing to the compromise of putting the responsibility into the voluntary nature of the property owner to let us know when it's time to reinspect. Because unfortunately, there are a few landlords within this community that have taken advantage of that accommodation and simply said, okay, well, I won't let the city know. And in this particular case, again, it was just an experience, to watch the entirety of that unfold. So I think that what is that column 5, that needs to go back to us, and we need to establish a time frame, and it has to be in specific intervals. Because clearly there are landlords out there that are just saying, I won't let the city know at this tenant turnover. And then tenant after tenant is stuck in living conditions that are not what we would deem appropriate. So that was another thing And that's a big one for me. I know the landlords are probably gonna be unhappy about that, you know, because there are a lot of good landlords that are doing the responsible thing. But it's clear that there's a reason that the, you know, overwhelming majority of these 25 other municipalities that run this type of program, you know, place that responsibility on the municipality itself. So to me, that has to happen. The other thing that I've noted when Councilmember Burnett called for, you know, a meeting of folks to come, and I think I saw it absolutely firsthand when I was, you know, provided the opportunity to attend just a single day in the landlord renters court. Out of 120 cases, about 81 of those cases were with one single landlord. I found that surprising. And of those 120 cases, maybe 5 to 10 total tenants showed up to contest the circumstances. And in 2 of those cases where individuals showed up to contest the circumstances, they did so contesting these 2 things. One, that they just decided, I'm not going to live in those conditions. And 2, I'm going to subject myself to not being able to find a rental in this community because by standing up for myself, landlords aren't going to rent to me. And I think that speaks to the exact thing that Councilmember Burnett said, in that we have to be able to have a venue in which tenants feel comfortable coming to this body or speaking to this body in some public setting where they don't feel that they run the risk of losing, you know, the only place they have to stay.
And I will add to that, one of the reasons why Emily and I chose Tacoma Park to go to is that they have a separate ordinance strictly on certain lease requirements. And then they had the acronym, and I'm going to probably mess it up just on how as far as it is, but basically it's a landlord tenant affairs board that basically the tenants can bring certain things, or landlords can, to that board that the elected body puts together, and then it has a hearing. And then from those hearings, then if the person objects to whatever the ruling was, it can go to circuit court. But it's a way to get it to, maybe you can almost say kind of like a mediation type thing, but not, because they're not coming to some terms. It's just seeing if someone was in violation. It was a very interesting, and they say it solves a lot of their issues.
I think that some type of process like that would absolutely give the tenant the necessary framework that they need to be able to appropriately share their circumstances when they get to that court process. Because in my opinion, by the time you got to that court process, it is like a conveyor belt. And there is no adequate time to sort of explain the circumstances in any type of mediated way. And, you know, to be very honest, you know, I have to imagine that the I forget what it's called, legal aid is overwhelmed with just the sheer volume in that process once it does get to that point. The other thing that I wanted to bring up was, and again, I know landlords are gonna be upset, you know, when I bring up some of these things, but let's take the case where we had a multitude of people in here upset that their utility had been disconnected, right? By no fault of their own, by no choice of their own, by no actions of their own, I should say by no inaction of their own. And the problem is, just like many other utilities to multi-unit buildings, there is this ability, right, for a tenant to go, hey, City of Hagerstown, I need my water back on. I can't help that the landlord didn't pay the bill. like to pay my water bill, what is it? And we say, oh, it's $15,760, right? Because the water bill is for the entire, 50 units. And so to me, when I was sitting through those court proceedings, those 2 days I went, the judge indicated that they have the ability to put funds or the funds owed between tenant and landlord in some type of escrow holding until such time as the parties meet whatever the determination is to reconcile the differences they have, right? And that's fine and good if you have the immediate means to then, come up with an alternative. Because in my opinion, in the case that I was there for, the landlord doesn't have any sort of like immediate pressure to remedy that issue that causes the place to be not habitable for the tenant, and the tenant doesn't have the means to immediately go find alternative resources to maintain stable housing while that's being remedied. And I thought, well, if you're being asked to put up your first month's rent and your, what's it called?
Security deposit.
Security deposit and your last month's rent, that should go in some type of fund that both the landlord and the tenant have access to, under the condition that if you were a landlord and you decided you weren't going to pay the utility bill, that person that lives in that place that clearly isn't going to be able to pay that $15,000 bill for 30 units that are owed, but they can at least have access to that money in an immediate fashion that says, you know what, it's probably going to take a week or two to get this resolved with this landlord and these issues that I'm having. I need those resources now to be able to secure appropriate alternative means of housing, in that interim. And it may be at the end of the day that, that landlord doesn't remedy that issue, but that's on that landlord, not that tenant. I just think the tenant should have some type of access to those funds, because I think it's completely inappropriate that a landlord can miss that obligation that is owed to that tenant to ensure that place is habitable, and at the same time hold that tenant's money in abeyance while that landlord decides, when they want to get to addressing that issue.
So I can share the Tacoma Park languages with you, and there's also something in the city of Frederick that they do as well. Tacoma Park, within their stuff, that if a property is condemned temporarily, the landlord is required to put them up somewhere for 7 days. Now, that's somewhere. Doesn't mean it's a hotel. That could be another unit in another building that they control, but it is something that's there. If it's for a long-term condemnation, I'm sorry, I don't recall what long-term is, the landlord is required to pay the 2 months rent for the tenant for another place that they have to go to.
Sounds like language I am absolutely interested.
So there's that within the city of Frederick that, and I can't vouch for the legalities of it. We have to work with our city attorney, but the way they have stuff set up is that any fees collected through the rental licensing program over and above the expenses goes into a separate fund that they allow tenants to then make applications to get assistance for something else, for whatever the enforcement of that rental facilities program. If the enforcement of it displaces them or creates some sort of displacement for them to not be in that property anymore due to the conditions, they can make applications to that fund to get money to assist them. So there are different things that other jurisdictions have done and have done those research on them. Just have to see what abilities we have.
So, and like I said, I'd love to read and hear and consider all of that. The other thing that I noted from this specific, and I hate to use this, but it's just very fresh in the mind, was it was clear that, so let's say the issue occurs on April 1st, and the city goes out and says, okay, landlord, by May 1st, you got to fix this thing. And the landlord says, okay, thank you for letting me know, and they don't fix it by May 1st, right? And there's no obligation, except that the city said you got to fix this item by May 1st. and the tenant's still staying there, and it comes May 1st and they don't fix it, and you say, oh, now we're going to proceed with an issue of notice of violation and a court date for that, right? And the court date gets set for September 1st, right? So between May 1st and September 1st is the period that the city has to wait to actually like complete that enforcement process because you need that hearing date. The problem is that tenant or whomever that tenant, let's say, may be getting assistance from says, ooh, this issue happened April. It is now May. It wasn't corrected. It is now June. And we're not going to keep, paying for this place that isn't, properly habitable. And we're not going to pay July. What happens is, because our date is several months removed, that landlord can then take that tenant to landlord court to collect that funding, knowing that they have that time frame of 2 to 3 months, you know what I mean, in between to sort of, I don't know, almost like, okay, I really don't have to execute this, with the immediacy that's being conveyed, because I really don't have to do it until, if I get it all done by the court date, then I'm good. And I just, that part to me was, it just didn't seem kosher. I don't know how to say that.
Councilmember, what are they giving them 30 days to do?
So let's say with a notice of violation, so let's say you have to do corrective action X. City says, you've got to correct these things, that we found to be an issue in the apartment that this tenant contacted us about. You have until May 1 to do it. Well, May 1 rolls around, landlord hasn't even started the process of doing that because they're waiting for that letter from the city that says, now you're in violation. We've set a court date, and the court date is August 1st, and you have until August 1st to fix this. Well, the tenant is still sort of required to pay that rent in the 3 months that the court process has now given the landlord to take that corrective action. But if the landlord says, you know what, I'm going to wait till July 15th and then I'll get to it, and because it isn't a big fix, the tenant has to live through that process for 2 to 3 months because that's the court process. However, if it isn't fixed and it's not livable and the tenant is still obligated to that rent during that period, then they get taken to renter's court, which is a more expedient process than the violation court process. And so, they can sort of process that one court process sort of against the other in terms of timing to comply with what the city's directing and to ensure that they are able to continue to collect rent in a deficient apartment, you know what I mean, without having to fix that issue. And the only alternative that the tenant has is really to move out, to live with the deficient condition, or hope that the judge says, you know what, we'll put that period of time in escrow, and you'll owe it once this issue finally gets fixed, which could be,
What was the situation to where, say they're in violation, but as long as they have started, you know what I mean? Like, what if that could be applied to that, to where the landlord at least has to show proof that they started the work. Like, they wouldn't be able to wait all that time and then decide, oh, I'm gonna wait. Like, I forgot what we were talking about before, where they had to at least, as long as they have started whatever the complaint is, then, we'll accept that, in so many words.
It can be part of the process. It all depends on the situations and the seriousness of a violation. But a lot of them do go where they start some work and then we continue where we grant extensions, where we're saying, okay, giving Councilmember Alshires example that if they had April 1 and then it was the May 1 deadline, we came out after May and it wasn't done, but we could see that they were doing work, we'd give them another 30 days before we like issue a fine. And then you can see compliance in it, but there has to be some sort of end date to that type of stuff too, because the tenant is the one that's living in it. And as Councilmember Alshire was saying, that if you get to a certain point with certain things with the rent escrow can only be for life safety type items. So it has to be something that crosses a certain threshold of a violation. So something that may be a violation of code might not be considered a life-threatening violation to the courts for an escrow case. So using Councilmember Alshire's example, that if the tenant was like, well, there's items that need to be fixed and they weren't life-threatening, the tenant's still obligated to pay the rent, but the owner per se isn't obligated to make that correction until the court date, because they have all that time. Even if we held them to a strict deadline, it takes 3 to 4 months before we get into court just from a fine. So a lot of time goes elapsed. So if the tenant chose not to pay rent just because they're like, oh, I'm not paying because it's poor conditions, and then using the council member's example of it's a conveyor belt to go through that rent court because it goes through very quickly, and that if they didn't pay the rent, that's just the burden of proof at that point, not generally the conditions that aren't an escrow type. And if they didn't pay, they could be evicted before we even get to court to even talk about the violation that was there.
And you can't enforce it until the 30 days?
The timelines vary from code to code. That's a general example of 30 days. Generally, a lot of the violations are 30 days, some are 2 weeks, but it's the fine that so when you're doing enforcement, as with anything, even the police department and the fire department can say when you're doing enforcement, that you can tell someone they're in violation of something. It's the threat of being fined is what makes people generally comply. That's why we all don't run red lights when we're getting through things, or stop signs and stuff, just because, one, you have other things, but you know what I'm saying, in general, same thing with it, you're in compliance. So it's the fine that makes people comply more than that. So if we don't fine for something, then, or if we do fine, they have till the court date to kind of come into compliance.
And one of the fines, can't be to revoke the license, the rental license, if it's like a severe matter, kind of like the incidents that just happened. If the tenant didn't, repeated. There was nothing done within that 30 days.
In our current system, it would have to be a point system to get you there. For this particular example, in general, it probably would not meet the requirements for points.
I think here's the two examples that I found. Sorry.
I'm trying to jump in like.
Let me finish these last two examples of what I found surprising. One, that no one in this entire particular process found that to date, the absence of cleaning up sewer water on the floor of somebody's apartment doesn't qualify as a life safety issue of someone having to live in that condition. No one's cleaned it up. It just simply evaporated, into air, the same as the rent. The second thing I found interesting, so that to me was odd, because I can tell you, managing a water and sewer system, in my profession, if there's a sewer backup, it's immediate. That is the one thing where we make sure that there is immediate response on every time, whether it's our fault or not, because that is a nightmare issue for anybody. So we clean up first and we ask questions second. That's just a reality. In this case, it must be different. So the second was that if you're getting assistance from an entity that helps you find a place, rent, you're the party that, let's say that entity says, oh, you know what, that was a bad experience, and I didn't pay them for the 3 months that you were there, and they haven't done the things they were supposed to do, and the court still obligates you as the renter to pay them. They're not obligating the agency that was covering some or all of that rent assistance for you, they're obligating you. And so you're stuck with that like $3,000 bill in your name, not the entity that was assisting you to pay for the place you were at. And so, you leave with that obligation. The agency gets to sort of just find you another place and chalk that up and move on. I just thought that was wild. So and I know that probably doesn't rest at this table, but, it just was odd. So now I'm done. So, sorry.
I sent about 10 ideas or so to Paul a couple months ago when we last talked about this in June. He did a very great job of responding with a lot of research to some of those items. And speaking of utilities, one of the things that I mentioned was, about displacement, so forth, which also in support of displacement ideas of how we can work that into our program. But with utilities, Paul mentioned that there are Maryland laws in place to protect tenants if landlords do not pay the utilities, if it is part of their lease. And there's section 8, 205 through 212. That's Maryland law. The tenants have the right to deduct their rent payment to a landlord if they pay the utility bill, if the landlord is to pay their lease. Right? So that information I found was pretty new to me. I didn't know that. Do we share that online? I know we share some things about the new changes with the state laws. Is that something we post to?
We have it on our website for the Maryland Tenant Bill of Rights, because that is, and the Tenant Bill of Rights are there to have, and the landlords are to provide the Tenant Bill of Rights to tenants. I believe it's annually in the state law that they're supposed to be providing that to them. But I will say it's very challenging to get down to that nitty gritty on everything, because it's not, I would love to say it's in Maryland law, it's just one page after another, but it's all in different sections across the state law.
I just think it's important for tenants to know that, And again, like I mentioned, displacement, what that looks like and how tenants can be supported in that process. I know you mentioned receivership law and some bond ideas. I would like to further look into that, what that looks like. I know you mentioned that obviously the city attorney will have to weigh in on that. And there's one more thing with the inspections. We do every 4 years, right?
We do it at vacancy, no more frequent than every 4 years. So in theory, that we could do an inspection and we not see them for 30 years, 40 years.
This is probably frowned upon, but I believe we should increase inspections, similar to what Cambridge does every 3 years. And the years that they're not inspected, to complete a checklist that we would provide. I think that checklist should capture, overall quality of the home, confirming that there's running water, confirming that there's electricity, things like that, instead of waiting for the vacancy to start the inspection. Because I know we receive emails about properties just in poor conditions with rodents and all kind of issues. And I think it's better to catch these things sooner than later. So that's my only two thoughts.
And to add on to that really quickly, can a tenant request an inspection?
Anytime. We do a lot of inspections that way.
And I know all this will be like more resources and more hours added to the team. I know all that's to consider, but it's worth looking into.
I can look into that stuff and work on that. Is there any other thoughts on rental?
I have one question.
Yes.
At the bottom of this page under fines, it says, the most common fines issued are for failure to register and failure to report tenant turnovers. Last license year resulted in 94 fines being issued for violating the ordinance. In other words, violating the ordinance of
Rental facility.
of failure to register. I'm assuming those weren't 94 different landlords that did that.
I do not know if they were all 94 different, but it was 94 different properties.
I would be interested to understand, no differently than you send us the stats on the hotels.
Yep.
I just, I think that we have to have an awareness of that. Because, we have to recognize that there are a lot of really good apples out there, and I think we got to find ways as we deliberate on this to sort of, protect that while, addressing the issues of bad actors.
I think that was. We've gone, there isn't a clock up there anymore. Gone way over on time. I'll go quick on the last one here to respect Steve as he's been sitting back there. The habitual offender, so sometimes as, this body has talked about holding some of our landlords that don't comply with the ordinances more accountable than ones that we have, or they're following, just as Councilmember Alshire just mentioned. The one ordinance that we do have is the habitual offender ordinance, chapter 65. It's been on the books for quite some time. Again, that was 2001. And we've amended it a couple times, but basically that's just been adding additional chapters to basically cross a threshold to get into compliance. And those are the property maintenance code, land management code, nuisance abatement, rental facilities, and then our vacant structures. Right now, someone violates that, it is a misdemeanor charge, so it has a little bit different weight to it. And then it could be $1,000 fine or 90 days in jail, or both. It's up to the judges on what they decide. And they could also order probation. They could also order the abatement of the violations, and they can require periodic inspections of the property. The challenges that we have, we issue on average about 200 municipal infraction citations a year for the code violations. That's outside of the rental facility violations. And like we already mentioned, it takes about 3 to 4 months to get into court. And as Councilmember Ashar gave the example, if they come into compliance prior to the court date, we do drop the charges against that individual. And so, it kind of makes it a little bit challenging to get to that level if we're taking them to court. Because right now, to qualify, you have to have 3 convictions, meaning, being found guilty, or they paid the fine. So if we're not getting those convictions because they're making the corrections prior to court, it just isn't crossing that threshold to be a habitual offender. There are 3 other Maryland jurisdictions that does have this. It's Salisbury, Cumberland, and Cambridge, as Councilwoman Burnett actually mentioned that municipality, that do have similar ordinances. They all vary as far as some penalties. I mean, Cumberland's very close to ours. I'll be honest, when I've talked to Cumberland, I believe they copied ours. And that with Cambridge and Salisbury, theirs are a little bit different. Salisbury, if found guilty, they do require 2 comprehensive inspections of the entire property in 12 months and found $500 fine. Cambridge does it where they require annual interior and exterior inspections for the next 5 years if they're found guilty. And then for rental properties, their licenses are revoked. So they do revoke them with those. So gave a couple proposals to it. If we wanted to amend this to kind of give it a little bit more going in lines with what we've talked about at this table a while ago. That one thing that Salisbury does is that they include 5 or more violations of the chapters in their ordinance, meaning that if they have 5 violations in a 12-month time period, that can get you to qualify for habitual offenders. So you keep on having repeat offenders of it. I would just say in there that we would exclude any mandated inspections from our programs, because it wouldn't look good if we're saying that, well, we're mandating you to have all these inspections, and then you had all these inspections, now you're in violation of this ordinance. That would just not, make good sense for us.
And
If-
then, sorry,
Yeah.
would it count if it's on different properties, or would those 5 offenses have to be on one particular property? Or could it
Right
be
now,
in
it's the
general?
individual.
It's just the individual, okay?
That if we did this, there would have been 50 that required, or that would have qualified in 2025 if we'd had this amendment. I will tell you that if we mandated rental inspections with those, that dropped to 30. So that just tells you right there that 20 properties were ones that have had 5 or more unreported tenant turnovers to our office. increase the fine amount to match state law. It's up to $2,500 now. So I think that's just keeping up with the times type of stuff. The one thing that we mentioned where the challenge is when we're dropping cases before we go to court, and this is, an advice of legal counsel, and they're advising to give the best advice to the city of Hagerstown. But Salisbury has it as if they just issue a citation, meaning a fine. They don't have it at any conviction level. If they issue a fine, that's a qualifying event, not going to court. So obviously they're familiar with the challenges when you have that. And then also one thing within our ordinance, we don't give the people an opportunity to get out of the habitual offender status if they do get it. So we do need to provide that path to get out of habitual offender if they were charged as one. So those are the proposals that we had. Of course, we'd have to work with legal counsel on what they're, comfortable with. Just because our jurisdiction has it doesn't always mean that that's legal. So we need to go through that process. But are we good with those proposed items, or are there other additional things or items you're concerned about?
I'm fine with it.
I just wanted to know, how many do we have in that current offenders list? Do we have
We've
any?
only charged 2.
Okay.
One is deceased, and one is no longer a landlord in Hagerstown.
Just one comment. As I mentioned at the June's work session, we have this habitual offenders program. We should still also have a good standing program as well to reward, like Councilman Alshire said, reward the good landlords. Make it publicly known, like these are the ones who have no violations and they're the
Highly
greatest
rated.
to rent from. Also rewarding those as well as having this program.
Something to look into, as you all indicated, mandating some inspections, we'd be able to give a more accurate list with that. Right now, I would not feel comfortable providing anything, not knowing the conditions of
Right.
the units.
Right.
Or an example to what Councilwoman Burnett just mentioned, certain cities have the ratings at the window based on restaurants, right? A through. So you kind of are aware before entering,
So the one thing that I am looking at right now is that the city of Baltimore and the county of Baltimore County, they require home inspectors to do theirs, and they have a scaling system where it does give a grade out of it. I'm just in the process of matching them up right now. I don't have an answer, but I am looking at that where you can create a grade for the inspection.
and then that would be beneficial for tenants who are looking, for rental properties. At least they could access that site and see the scaling, and then they can make the call.
Right.
Versus being fooled later on.
Yep, I am looking into that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I know I was here longer than the 30 minutes.
I wouldn't know it's the one.
Don't answer the question yet, please.
Thank you all.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
Three.
Next up, we have the Historic District
3:30.
Design Guidelines Update, Mr. Stephen Bachmiller.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm being joined by Mike Beard, who's the chair of the Historic District Commission. In your packet this week, we provided you a draft of the update of the Historic District Commission's design guidelines. Give you a little bit of a background. Ever since there's been a historic district, there have the design guidelines that are used as guidelines to lead the commission in their decisions when they entertain applications for work in the historic district. Historically, we've had 2 sets of guidelines, one for the downtown historic district, which is kind of unique compared to the other 3, which are predominantly residential. But we realized when we went to update them that it made a lot of sense just to combine them into a single document, because about 80% of the content of it was redundant to one another anyway. There's also things that over time we found are missing from the design guidelines that we thought needed to be added. So I know you haven't had a chance. It's 100 pages plus an appendix. So I just wanted to introduce this to you, and what we did is we combined the two documents. We also expanded information that's background. We also provided some additional, a lot of additional illustrations, because sometimes, especially in this kind of field, a picture's worth 1,000 words. As you review it, there's basically three types of text. If it's black text, it's material that has been, that was lifted pretty much verbatim, if not totally verbatim, from the existing guidelines that are in effect. If it's blue text, it's new content, but it's not necessarily anything that you would be concerned with from a policy standpoint. It's like providing additional information about various tax credit programs, adding terms to the glossary, things of that nature. The content that is in red, and there's not a lot of that, but the content in red is actually new content, which is put in to mostly address recent changes in the zoning ordinance dealing with signs and things like that, and also some additional policy issues associated with the use of more cost-effective alternate materials. We've been chipping away at this for several years now. It actually, I think, started under Megan Flick, if those of you who remember Megan. And then Joanna Wu carried forward with it until last year, and then I pretty much I'm bringing it up the home stretch here. But what we would like to do is just, we wanted to introduce it to you, let you know what it's about, and then what we'll do is, knowing that you haven't had time to digest it all, schedule another work session a couple weeks down range, give you time to absorb it, and then if you have any questions. One thing that we would ask is, when you are satisfied with it and we move to get you all to make some sort of motion to endorse it, we would ask that the motion that you adopt provides some language that allows staff to make non-content adjustments to the design guidelines. So any little change that we have doesn't have to come back to you every time. To give you an example, one of the illustrations that are that's in the section on landmark properties is a picture of a building that's in pretty rough shape at the moment. But within the next few months, it's going to start undergoing restoration. Once that's done, it makes no sense having a picture of the building in its distressed condition in the guidelines anymore, so we would replace the photo. Anything obviously that would be policy driven, obviously we would need to bring back to you. But like if the state changes one of their tax credit programs that we have described in here, you really need to see those kinds of things where you don't really have a say per se. We tried to make this a one-stop shop essentially for all issues associated with historic preservation within the city. Mostly centered around obviously the HDC, but other things as well. So if you have any questions, we'll be happy to try to field them for you, but otherwise we'll set up a work session in a couple or a few weeks for you to give us feedback.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Next, we have the review of the Klein Farm annexation.
Yep, so I'm just following up on our discussion about the Klein Farm annexation that we did a couple weeks ago. We did have some public comment, and we wanted to get some idea of how to proceed.
So how does the planned service area S5 apply to the property? Like what's the process they go through to what's the process and what's the necessity of a process to change that classification?
That process is administered by the county planning office. It's part of the county's water and sewer master plan. And my interaction with the county on these things is, once a property goes through the development process in the city, it's pretty much a formality to move it to a higher tier service area within the county's process.
But the applicant can't go through the county process. Is it piecemeal or is it annual? Like, applicant go through some form of process for a request for changing classification?
We're finding that it's piecemeal, that it's based on the individual property being close to being ready to develop. If there is an annual process, I'm not aware of it.
I mean, most counties now do an annual process where, you know what I mean? It's sort of like a comp plan where you look at it and go, okay, what are the pretenses for looking at any proposed changes to classification so that they properly match, you know what I mean, the properties in proximity to the utilities that are planned to serve them. It just seems a little outdated.
Would you mind, I think it's important being that the public hearing, the testimony on the record, this document that we have addresses five specific areas. Would you just go through so that we can get this on the record, go through each of these just to make clarifications of what those five contradictions were, please?
When we had the public hearing on this a couple weeks ago, Mr. Schlossberg appeared and made certain representations to this body regarding various issues associated with the expansion of the city and its jurisdiction and its services. And I provided to you all a memo on this issue addressing 5 of those, and I'll just go through them briefly. Well, actually, the first one we just talked about, which was more in reaction to a question from Councilmember Alshire. Item number 2, there was some concern about the fact that
But Steve,
yes.
state what that was. The councilman's question was a good question.
Oh, okay.
Just go ahead and clarify
Okay.
so that you can answer him on the record.
Gotcha. There is basically a water and wastewater service plan, and there's certain tiers within which properties are rated throughout the region. I believe it's like a 1 through a 5 kind of system. I'm not entirely familiar with it myself. But what it does is for a property to be afforded water and sewer service, it needs to be in one of the higher designations, like the 1 level kind of thing. And the property has been sitting unused, well, essentially forever. It's a cornfield. But the property was annexed in 1970 and is sat within the city's jurisdiction undeveloped for 50 years now plus. So as a result, it has not rated really high. So when a property goes through the development process, such as this property is in the process of doing, one of the review elements of it is that in order for the site plan to be signed off on, it has to be assigned at a higher tier. And that's, it's my experience within the last couple of years, because this was actually a relatively recent change in the way the system is pursued, has been a relatively perfunctory process at the county level where the developer makes a request and the county says, okay, we'll change it essentially, and they issue a letter. So, regarding Eastern Boulevard, it's a principal arterial road serving the entire region. One of the questions that was brought up at the hearing, or one of the comments that was made by Mr. Schlossberg, is if the county knew the city was going to annex this road, maybe they would have pursued their design or construction of Eastern Boulevard's widening differently. We're not exactly sure where he was going with that. It was kind of a 1-sentence statement, and then he moved on. But the staff would point out that everybody in the county, including the residents of the city of Hagerstown, are Washington Countyans, and it's a region-wide issue when you're expanding a 2-lane road to a 4-lane road that serves large parts of the county, including large parts of the metropolitan area. The Eastern Boulevard carries like 22,000 trips per day. A large percentage of that traffic is commuters who live north and west of the city and up in the southern Pennsylvania, for that matter, who use that area. But of course, they're not city residents, they're not paying city taxes, et cetera. So the thought that's, again, I don't want to read too much into Mr. Schlossberg's comments because he wasn't really clear himself on what he was attempting to say. But there should be no issue with the county addressing a regional transportation issue, even if it's on land that technically is within the municipal jurisdiction of the city of Hagerstown. And also, if the property was to be developed, and keep in mind, the property is zoned residential in the county, therefore, it's going to develop for housing one way or the other. If it is an annex into the city, then you're going to have all these people who are now outside of the city limits, also going to be using city streets as well, but nobody seems to be worried about, the city absorbing the cost of maintaining streets that people who don't live here and don't pay taxes for maintain. So it's kind of a balancing act, if you will, as far as how that's dealt with, because you got people who reside in the city and you have people who reside in the county, and they both drive on both sets of roads. Regarding Mr. Schlossberg's comments regarding how the county does, or the city does not cooperate with the county on such matters, we would point out that the Klein family came to the city of Hagerstown asking for annexation. And this was after a lengthy period of attempting to find some sort of accommodation with the county to allow development to move forward. And so and also on a number of issues, and I'm probably stepping outside of my bounds a little bit, but there's a number of issues that are obviously of conflict between the city and the county, and the city has repeatedly asked for cooperation and communication and often gets rebuffed. So what Mr. Schlossberg was trying to say there isn't entirely clear either, or particularly accurate in its representation, because the city is always willing to talk to the county. But in my memo, I did point out, as far as communication, several dates within the last year where the city staff did communicate with the county and the county staff, and also some background information from the Klein family as far as their attempts to communicate with the county over development issues on this property, and got essentially no response. Item number 4 is regarding issues associated with school capacity. The City of Hagerstown does not have an adequate public facilities ordinance for schools. Therefore, the county's APFO will not apply once the property or a property that is brought into the city goes through the development review process. As far as capacity goes, I provided you all a chart based on the most recent data provided by the county's Board of Education regarding capacity countywide in the countywide school system, and also in the high schools here in the immediate Hagerstown area. The county has adjusted their building excise tax within the last year, increasing that and basically placing more of the development burden for addressing school capacity on the building permit side versus the development side. They made some adjustments, both their adequate public facilities ordinance and their excise tax ordinance, which in their defense, frankly, does do things to help somewhat equalize the contribution of development within the city toward the development of additional school capacity in the county. But I do want to point out that based on the data that we've been able to collect from the Board of Education, and this goes back to our effort last year to understand what they were doing with their excise tax ordinance. Keep in mind that the city of Hagerstown, on average, averages less than 80 new building permits for new dwellings per year in the city. That's not outrageous or rapacious growth. And also the growth rate of the countywide school population is nearly flat at 0.14% per year, or about 35 kids or one classroom per year. So the school board and the county have a growth rate that puts one additional classroom, the equivalent of in the entire county, into their system every year, and they need to effectively plan for that. As it relates to this, the express approval process, where if the zoning is not consistent with the county zoning, which the zoning that's being requested here is not, the county has what's called express approval, where unless they give express approval, the property cannot be developed for a period of 5 years after the annexation takes effect. And the supposed justification for that is it buys the county time to plan for additional road, school capacity, et cetera, that may be generated by a development. So this is a development that also, there is no development actually. They're just bringing it into the city knowing it will be developed sometime in the future. There's no school students that would be generated on this property until at least 2032, if not later, depending on, the effects of the market, et cetera, over the next 6-7 years. So they have 5+ years to plan for however number of students may ultimately end up being produced by this site. And then as far as the last item is just motivations for annexing into the city. Keep in mind too that in this particular case, the city is not demanding anything of the applicant at this time. The annexation is specifically because the the property owners came to the city asking for annexation, knowing that they would be stuck with the 5-year stall. And they figured, well, we might as well get the clock going, and they couldn't get any traction with the county. So that's where we're at. If you have any questions on that, I'll be happy to try to answer.
Thank you for the thorough responses.
Did we receive anything as part of the record that confirmed that legal counsel that spoke at the hearing was in fact officially employed to represent the county?
No,
I mean, I know they stood up and said they were, but
we received nothing in the file, no.
so, I mean, I could have spoke, said I'm here to represent the county.
That's very true. Yes.
Okay. It's just odd that like there's a state process of annexation, that says, hey, jurisdiction X, here's the requisite process to respond to jurisdiction Y for this proceeding. You don't do it and say you're not going to do it. And then an individual appears at a meeting and says, I'm doing it on behalf of that jurisdiction. But other than those verbal comments, I'm assuming you didn't receive anything.
We received
In
nothing
writing.
official from the county government
Because
saying.
here
that
are
Mr.
the official comments, of this council we've privately and separately employed to convey on our behalf in this succinct manner.
We received nothing in writing as far as the normal process goes of providing written comment. We
Or at the
received-
meeting.
Or
Like
at the
we
meeting.
handed something at the hearing that said, here
No.
are the formal comments of the
No.
county.
No.
If somebody got up and said, I'm here to represent the county and here's my thought.
And I will say for the record that when this came up at the hearing, I went back and looked at our email communication between ourselves and county staff. And it's clearly on record that we were asking for comments, and I even asked in an email that I personally sent, asking them, please don't just bring them to the meeting. If you could, have them to us in advance of the meeting.
Was the individual that indicated they were speaking on behalf of the county party to those communications?
No, not that I'm aware of. I mean, it's possible he might have been copied on it or I wouldn't have seen it before, but he was not part of the communication, no.
I mean, that's odd. That's just a reflection.
Yeah. So,
I'd like to make one just small. I just kind of did the math just on high schools. And 1,496 open seats in the county, not counting Barbara Ingram or Board Michael Technical School. 1,496 open seats, and we're over at South High by 178 and North at 56.
All of the high schools that surround North and South High are significantly under capacity. Smithsburg is under capacity, Clear Spring is under capacity, Boonesboro is under capacity, Williamsport is under capacity.
And that's where that total of 1,496 came from. I just actually did the math on it.
Yeah, so part of the
Yeah.
problem is that for whatever reasons that they may have for doing so, the lack of redistricting at the county level,
That's fortitude. It's called fortitude.
I wasn't going to go there, but you can.
Well, just, I mean, listen, when you put 17 portables at one high school, that's the most overcapacity in the county, that happens to be located in like the dead center geographically of the county, that has more portables than all other high schools in this county combined. And if you add in middle schools, has almost all more portables than the high schools and the middle schools combined.
And as far as I
Then
know,
it's just an absence of practical desire to look at that and say, hey, you know, maybe the metrics of this aren't what they should be.
and also I looked at the county's recently adopted budget, and there does not appear to be any planning for any sort of additional capacity at high schools in the county budget.
I don't know that there needs to be as much as there needs to be some
Yeah.
process of evaluation that says, hey, you know, maybe these 200 houses we just built east of Funkstown can take 40 down to Mapleville and down to Boonesboro just as quickly as they could take, you know, that long ride to South High. I don't know.
So where we're at now is we're seeking direction from you all. Normally, this involves direction from us to process the motion for adopting the resolution of annexation and moving forward.
And that would be this month?
August 25th.
Yep.
You want to move forward, council?
I'm fine with it.
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pete. City Administrator.
Just a couple of things, Mayor. The Charter Review Committee applications are deadline for this week. So anybody that may be interested, hadn't pulled the trigger, go to hagerstownmd.org, and that application is there, and be a part of probably what is the most important document related to city operations, which is the charter itself. Secondly, yesterday, huge storm came through here in the afternoon. A storm that we usually get once every 10, 15 years. It was overwhelming to the system, to the drainage system. And I know there were several residents that had some water in their basement, water in yards and that kind of thing. That was Mother Nature, unfortunately. And we just, it was a freak storm. I had water in my front yard, and that has never happened in 36 years that I've lived on Summit Avenue, and water actually in the alley behind my house that I haven't seen in decades. 1.6 inches, I think, in 15 minutes yesterday. It was a mess. So we appreciate everybody's patience. We will go back through and look at curbage and drainage and see if there's anything we can do to help those areas that were hit really hard. But we just appreciate everybody's patience on giving us time to look at that. Go to hagerstownmd.org for a list of events for this week. Midweek music is tomorrow night outside still. Should be a nice night. And come downtown over the weekend, and should be a good weekend out and about. That's it for me. August-Overfest is also on Saturday out at the Ag Center. I don't know how many, if you got invitations to come out for the keg tapping. I'll be out there to help with that, so shocker. But that should be a good time also. That's it for me. Thank you.
Councilwoman Burnett.
Just one thing. Voice is gone. This is what happens when you yell at kids at the park every Sunday. 200 plus kids. Anyway, I'd like to speak on the Wheaton Park welcome signage. I want to thank Councilwoman Bell and Anderson and Mayor McIntyre for attending, as well as the staff that has been a part of this journey, and Terry Brandt for creating the signage. We managed to have some speakers, myself and one speaker before the rain hit, like literally 25 minutes later, just started pouring down rain. But I thank everyone for coming out. And there on that signage, we didn't get a chance to speak about it on Saturday, but there's a square that's going to have a QR code. And the QR code is supposed to take you to like a website or some sort to continue to add information about the community, about more historical facts. So stay tuned for that, but there is a place for that. So we were hoping to work with some young people to help create some type of website.
We want to incorporate in that's going to be part of the refreshing up of the markers.
Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome, yeah.
Yep.
So stay tuned for that. And with that, that's all. Thank you.
Councilman Flaherty?
I'm sorry that I missed the Wheaton Park. I'm so glad they got their sign. I'm so glad you guys were there in attendance, and I'm glad it went well. So.
Councilwoman Anderson?
Yes, I just wanted to thank Dr. John Leake and Ananda Leake for coming and speaking, and sharing some history. I'm sad that I missed that conversation, but I will take the time to dive into this book. And I just had another comment that I just wanted to say. I've said it before at the 2025 State of the City, but I guess I'll just say it again. I don't consider myself a Hagerstown resident. I'm a Washington County resident, and I don't know why that's so hard to digest that, Hagerstown is within Washington County. And that's the only comment that I have.
Councilman Alshire?
I have nothing.
Councilwoman Bell?
Yes. Do want to let everyone know, in case they didn't, that Mr. Richard Ed Pass, he was the owner of the house on Jonathan Street.
Oh, no.
Yes, he was such a sweet, humble individual. So just sending prayers to those that knew him, and not even sure if he really has a lot of family left. Councilmember Burnett, do you know? Yes, I'm not sure either. So just wanted to give a shout out to that. Also, at the Bethel Garden, at the meeting yesterday, Officer Morris was there and Sean Griffin was there, and we were talking about how can we implement more security in Bethel Gardens. And actually, Officer Morris, is it Morris or Morrison? Morris? Just Morris. Okay. He came up with a really good idea to see if possibly if they could use some funding from the CBDC grant to get some security down there, and maybe do it like a pilot to see how it goes, to see how well that's perceived. And I did ask Sean Griffin to touch base with Kathy to see, as far as their security, how that works, the funding they get for that, and see how it can possibly transfer over. Do want to give a huge shout out to Councilmember Burnett for the signage. The ribbon cutting was really down to the last minute. We had just got done, so it was really good. The turnout was really good. The signs look amazing up there. And shout out to Terry as well. She did amazing with the signs. And that's all I have.
I have one small thing. Myself and Senator McKay and Commissioners Klein and Barr were able to attend a fellow's named Connor Davis. He got the rank of Eagle Scout on Sunday, and we were able to attend that. And I just wanted to publicly give him recognition and say what a great accomplishment that is for someone. So I just want to give Connor Davis a shout out. With that, I'd like to ask for a motion to move into executive session.
So moved.
Well, hold on one second. I gotta read this. I got in trouble last time. To consider a matter that concerns the proposal for a business or an industrial organization to locate, expand, or remain in the state.
So
Second, and do I have a second?
second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're now in executive session.